It's always fun to notice differences in titles. So we sent in these things in August, and so at that point, the title was, There is Something That the Constitution Just Is. And Evan was thinking like, well, the just part kind of suggests necessity in a way that is unhelpful. Maybe just there's something that the Constitution is. And I thought, wow. Maybe our is a way to really heighten the contingent aspect of things. So I have a section in my paper from years ago, the contingency of constitutional ontology. So what the Constitution is something that's contingent. It could have been different in different worlds. And that's one big aspect to this paper that I think various people writing about common theory have not seen as clearly as they could. And I think that it really explains what's going on with one particular piece of evidence, John Quincy Adams and his response to Thomas Paine. So just as a kind of overarching, what are we up to? We're not attempting, and we're kind of specifically distinguishing the task of American constitutional theory from. We're not attempting to understand the nature of language as such. Okay, we would like to understand language as such. Okay, I go to grad school to learn a little bit about language as such. I've got views, but hoping those views, not like views with a capital V sort of views. So language as such, a constitution as such, interpretation as such. If there are truths about those things, okay, if there are necessary truths that would be true of any possible constitution, well, of course, they would also be true of our Constitution, but our focus is not on that. It's also not on law as such, okay. It's about our Constitution, our particular Constitution. And in order to figure out the nature of our Constitution, you have to look at particulars. And if you're not looking carefully at particulars, I don't think you're going to understand the nature of our Constitution well. So beware. If you buy a book that claims to explain constitutionalism and is also written by an American, be very, very careful about accepting any claims unless it actually talks about particulars. Okay. But I'm not going to make any particular comments about a book that I haven't had a chance to read because it only got to my mailbox back in Mississippi yesterday. So our Constitution, how does our Constitution define itself? Well, let's, not beg any questions. How does the 1788 document define itself? It defines itself spatially and temporally. Spatially, by doing things like talking about the preceding Constitution in a cover letter. So, big question, can the Constitution be put into your pocket? Well, the framers talked a lot about putting the Constitution into their pockets. Okay. So, Okay, so this is the general project. So this is sort of a sequel to Evan and I. We have an article, What is the Object of the Constitutional Oath? And it's also a sort of sequel to my Notre Dame piece. But it's also a third thing, which is a response to these papers in the book by Jonathan Giedam. Okay. So Giedam is wonderfully focused on a very important question: what is the Constitution? So there's a wonderful picture of Jonathan at a blackboard, and the sentence, what is underlined, the Constitution. And that is an absolutely important question. I think he's wrong. We think he's wrong to say that no originalists have given any attention to this question. My Notre Dame piece years ago has this issue, has a whole section, the contingency of constitutional ontology. Walter Murphy, back when I was an undergrad, he and James Fleming and Sanford Levinson, they all in the 80s mentioned this issue. They didn't discuss it at great length, but they talked about what is the Constitution. So that's always been rattling around in in my brain. But the details of how the Constitution defines itself are very important. So the Constitution of several states says this Constitution shall be enrolled on parchment. Okay, it's a particular text. Ginep's response to that, when he talks about the New Hampshire evidence, I think is pretty. It has a problem. He says this Constitution, this form of government, I think in the case of New Hampshire, shall be set in a particular office and placed next to all the other laws of the land. Just because you're getting put in an office next to all the other laws of the land doesn't mean your nature as a document, doesn't mean the nature of the New Hampshire Constitution is going to be necessarily the same as all these other documents. You can't understand the nature of a species just from the nature of a genus, okay? Being a particular person, particular human being, is determined by things that are different from any roles that you happen to satisfy. So being the emperor of France doesn't change Napoleon's nature as a human being. Okay, being placed alongside all these other laws of the land doesn't make the New Hampshire Constitution into merely the status of all these other things. Okay. Ginep admits, so he thinks that current originalists and textualists are wrong to think of the Constitution as something that can be put in your pocket. He admits that James Iredell, and Thomas Paine thought otherwise. So he says Paine talked repeatedly and many times about taking the Constitution out of your pocket, okay? And Iredell says the Constitution is not a mere imaginary thing, but a very specific thing that we all have recourse to when he's writing to Spate in 1787. And Ginep claims those folks are idiosyncratic. I think he's wrong about this. The most dramatic piece of evidence from his article of last July is John Quincy Adams' response to Paine. And in context, if you look at the details, Adams is agreeing with Paine about the nature of the American Constitution. He disagrees about the nature of constitutions in general. Okay, so just to review the bidding, the Revolution in France, Burke writes, Reflections on the Revolution in France, 2 minutes. Paine, so Burke says that France is getting rid of their ancient constitution. You need to be like England. We have a constitution. Paine says England doesn't even have a constitution. You need to be like America, where we can explicitly refer to it in written form. And Adams says, if that were the definition of a constitution, only America would have a constitution. So Adams agrees with Paine about the nature of American constitution. He only disagrees about whether Britain has a constitution. Okay. A bunch of other things in the paper that we can get into about the nature of language, about how radical and indeterminist Ginep is. I have been told that he has agreed with the less radical readings of his work that suggest that there is not, that there could be meaning expressed by a term at a particular point in time. Even if it is difficult to tell what that is. One very important distinction just about the nature of language. I think the only thing we have to say about the nature of language is that it's possible for a language norm to exist and for people not to know about it, which means it's possible for the nature of a constitution to exist, but us not to know about it for a few years. So if you know the order of adjectives section, we're looking for a better example there that'll be really zippy. But you can't say green great dragons in English. It's odd. You do have to say great green dragons. Is that right now? So sometimes these can have semantic significance. The stuff, Karl von Frisch on the bees, all that stuff. That is an important distinction. Also have a section about whether the founders believed in the sense-reference distinction, which was something I've wondered about for a while. But anyway, that's 10 minutes. Thank you to Bernie for responding, as she has done on other occasions as well.